Path of Exile 2 releases into early access in just a few weeks, and we're starting to see more information about it, and it's nothing like any of us expected. So where lots of games focus on, the story first, they focus on getting a really polished campaign, and then the end game might be a bit lacking. Looking at you, Diablo 4, which had an amazing story, but pretty much no end game for the first season or two. Well, Path of Exile 2 is taking a completely different approach. So today I want to talk about the big endgame features, and they've shown like 7 big endgame features that are going to be live in the early access for us all to play out. Each of these have their own system, their own skill tree, progression, bosses, rewards. And if you've played Path of Exile before, you're gonna be familiar with a lot of them, but everything they've said has been reworked, improved, and redesigned with new items, new bosses, and it looks pretty exciting. So strap in because there's a lot to go over here. Okay, so in early access, Endgame will start once you complete 3 of the campaign acts, and then you complete those 3 again on cruel difficulty. And that's because the campaign isn't fully finished yet. When the full game is out, you'll do the whole campaign as normal, I believe, and then you'll jump into Endgame. But for early access, we'll do 3 again on a harder difficulty to, I guess, get better gear, level our characters, and get us ready for the endgame. And then once we've done that, we unlock the Atlas of Worlds. And that's pretty much what you see here. This big map full of little nodes. And if you've never played Path of Exile before, it's probably quite confusing. But basically what this is there's all these small nodes, and each one is different, has a different biome, has different monsters, and each one has different rewards, different challenges, different things that can happen, and different events that can appear within them. And your job is to go around here and play through each of these nodes. And as you do, you get different items and different things that can strengthen the Atlas. And as the Atlas gets stronger and the challenge increases, the rewards go up. So that's kind of your end game. And this system alone has like a massive skill tree, like a passive tree, where you can increase bosses, increase rewards, and increase the difficulty of everything you do. So as you're playing through, you're going through these different biomes, you're going through like the towns, the desert, all these different areas, the different things. You'll see different icons above each of these and different like towers spread around. And that's because as you go around, you'll be triggering different of these end game systems. So I want to talk through those. Like if you go down here, you can see them. You've got breaches, expeditions, rituals, and deliriums, and then like the pinnacle threat, which is like a big boss. And basically, as you go around, you'll interact with each of these different endgame systems. But this isn't just some random event. This is like a key pillar of the endgame. And doing this alone, it has its own skill tree. It has its own rewards. It has its own progression system. It has its own items that drop that you can use for like metacrafting. It has it's like its own version of the end game tied within one node that you'll go to. So this is the end game. The end game is one big map that is built upon loads and loads and loads of small systems that all come together. And as you play around, you are in charge of deciding how this map goes, how strong this map gets, the direction of where you take yourself, the direction of how strong you make the events. And as your character gets stronger and you get better at the game, you can pump the rewards up, you can pump the damage of the bosses up, you can make this harder and harder and harder to the point where you're constantly challenging yourself. And I think that's the beauty of what a lot of people like in PoE1, and it's looking even better in Path of Exile 2. Okay, so let's get into these endgame activities in a bit more detail. First up, let's talk about the breach. So they've shown this as you find these purple hands on the map, that is a sign that there's a breach inside. So you'll go into these, and these are like big tears in reality, and it makes the whole zone go all dark, and you have to fight monsters to beat a timer. And the faster you beat them, the longer you can stay in. If you're a Diablo player, I suppose it's similar to like pits where you're fighting against the clock, and if you get there by a certain time, you get more rewards. And it's all about clear speed. It's all about getting these breaches completed as fast as possible, staying in it as long as possible. You can also trigger additional breaches by finding tablets, and then you see these big overworld towers. You can put the tablets in the towers and it will spawn more breaches around it. On top of this, you can empower these tablets to make the breaches around it even stronger. So you can upgrade the tablet, put it in, and make it stronger. And they even showed if you have towers nearby, so let's say there are 2 towers close together, you can put a tablet in both, empower the breaches in different ways, and then any overlapping breaches will be like multiply empowered, making them even harder and giving even better rewards. Okay, now for the rewards. Every single endgame activity in Path of Exile 2 gives a specific type of player progression or player power. And for breaches, it's catalysts. So there are these catalysts that will increase the power and the quality of your rings and amulets. On top of this, you can also find something called a breach ring. And the reason they're so good is because they gain more power from the catalysts. So you find a really good breach ring, you find really good catalysts, and then you empower the breach ring, and they've said this can be one of the strongest rings in the game. That's like a whole endgame thing right there to focus on. As well as this, you can find splinters to open a realm gate to fight one of the big bosses. For breaches, that boss is called Zesh, and he looks absolutely amazing. I think this is an incredibly designed boss, and I can't wait to try it. And then with all these endgame activities, they have their own skill tree as well. So these skill trees make the thing harder and give it better rewards. Same as everything else. You can have like extra mobs in here. There can be extra splinters drop. And some of the skill points that you go into in this tree can only be unlocked by beating Zesh, by beating the boss. So once you beat the boss, you can then get points to put into your skill tree, and then the next point in the skill tree might need you to beat the boss on an even harder difficulty. So it's like that's your progression constantly, trying to beat a harder and harder version of the boss to make the boss harder and to make the breaches harder to give more rewards. And you're going to see a lot of that in everything Path of Exile 2. Okay, next up we have expeditions, which are basically an archaeological dig site. So you can go here and you progress through all of these different dig sites and blow them up. Each time you do that, you unleash monsters and corruption and bigger challenges. It looks like the further down you go, the stronger it gets as well. And similarly to the breaches, you can find tablets, and the tablets can be put in the towers, and the towers will give you more of these expeditions nearby. So I think that's a running theme here, that the doing one of a certain activity can give you tablets to unlock more of that activity. As well as that, these tablets can be upgraded to give the dig sites more mobs, more power, more relics, rare monsters, that kind of thing. The rewards for this are vendors that you can trade in your relics to for specific items. And then there's the final thing you're looking for here is similar to breaches, you're looking for the breach rings. Here you're looking for something called a logbook. And the logbook is like a separate expedition, like a new expedition you can go to, which is kind of like empowered and goes on for longer. It has special things here that aren't in the normal expeditions, and you have a chance to find the boss, the big boss here. And defeating the boss gives you skill points to use in the skill tree. So I think after explaining 2, you see the theme that all of these things have the same kind of system: a base feature, a reward, a harder feature, a boss, and then a skill tree. And it all comes back to the start, and it's like roguelike. You go in, you do it all, you beat the boss, you get a skill point, you empower it, and you go in again. Next, we have rituals, which are the next endgame activity, and these are shown by a red horned figure on your map. And defeating enemies near an altar will basically re-trigger everything you've defeated to come back to life. And the beauty in this is that when you do one ritual, it's fairly straightforward. You beat a bunch of enemies, you trigger the ritual, and you beat them all again. When you go to the next ritual and you beat a bunch of enemies around the ritual, you trigger the ritual, you have to defeat all of the enemies you just defeated, and then all of the enemies from the last ritual will come back to life as well. So the more of these rituals you do, the bigger the pool of enemies gets that you're bringing back to life. And eventually you're just bringing back this massive horde of mobs that you have to defeat. And obviously defeating a massive amount of monsters will give you even more rewards. And the rewards for this is tribute. The more of these monsters you defeat, the more tribute you get. And you can spend the tribute on gear or omens. And they haven't really given us much information on what omens are, but they've said they're going to be used for metacrafting. So using Path of Exile 1, you can assume it's going to be things to fine-tune your gear. We had lots of stuff like rolling certain items, rolling certain affixes, trying to fish for certain things on certain items, trying to move around like gem slots, that kind of thing. So there's likely going to be certain things here for fine-tuning your items. And if it's anything like Path of Exile 1, we're going to need a lot of them. So yeah, this is definitely going to be a big part of Endgame. And hopefully we see more about what these omens do. Very similar to the other Endgame features, we're going to have tablets to use in towers. So again, find a ritual, find a tablet, empower the tablet, get more rituals. Same thing, there's going to be a big Endgame boss and a skill tree that ties it all together. Okay, and the last sort of normal Endgame activity that we're going to talk about is Delirium. So this is a mirror that can appear that will take you to a mist of Delirium. So defeating mist monsters will give you rewards, and they get harder and more challenging the further into the mist you go. The reward for this is something called Distilled Emotions, which they didn't give too much information on, but you can combine these emotions and create items that give you passive points that you can put on your amulet. So that sounds like a huge chase item, right? Letting you get passive points for free that come out of this massive, 1,500 skill point tree. And you can get this to put on your gear for free. So that feels huge. Like the logbooks, for expeditions, they have a special zone you can access called simulacrums. And this is a wave-based thing. So waves of enemies that get harder and harder and harder, and you can choose to stay or leave after each wave or after so many waves. So you can sort of like risk reward to see if you're going to get the really, really good item, or leave with what you've already got if it starts getting too difficult. So yeah, lots of progression here, and same as everything else, you know, skill tree, tablets, everything you know already is in this one as well. This is the one I'm probably the most excited for, because I love, you know, the risks of like having a wave-based thing where you can risk it all to go for another wave to try and get extra rewards, or you can be safe and stay and leave what you've got. And then, you know, chasing these really rare passive items is going to be fun as well. So this is definitely the one I'm the most excited for. But yeah, that's kind of all of the base endgame systems. There's some more stuff I want to talk about, but they're the big things that you're going to find. Okay, so those 4 are like your big overworld endgame activities. You'll see the icon, you'll go do them, you'll find the tablet, you'll unlock more of them, and you'll empower them to be harder and harder and harder. But on top of those, there are also other endgame things we'll be doing, and one of them is trials. So the way they explain trials is that as you progress through the game, you'll unlock these trials, and you can use these trials to unlock your ascendancy. So that's your kind of like how you evolve your skill. So you go from your base starter class to your evolved ascendant class. But on top of that, when you get to endgame, you can go back and redo these like hard versions of these trials. So let's talk about those. And the whole point of this video is to try and keep things as simple as possible and not just go into too much depth, because I don't want to make things too confusing. So I want to try and keep this simple, but it's not that simple. So I'll try my best. So the first trial is the Trial of Sekima. So this is basically a roguelike. And the main reward for completing these Trials of Sekima is jewels. And if you played Path of Exile, you'll know the importance of jewels. So on your skill tree, this massive like 1,000 plus point skill tree, you are progressing around it, and you're going to find jewel slots, these big empty jewel slots. And that's where these go. So basically, these give massive amounts of player power and massive amounts of progression, and you're really going to want the right ones. So the one they showed here, they didn't show much, but the one they did show in this was a jewel that when you put it in, it empowered all the nodes around it by 25%, and it had this big circle of effect. So expect these to be very, very important. You can also empower these trials to give you really powerful, unique items at the cost of making them really difficult. The one they showed was the ability to make it a one-hit run. So if you get hit once on the entire trial, it's over. So it's kind of like a deathless run in like Dark Souls. So yeah, if you're a hardcore player, if you're a professional player and you want to take this really seriously, this is going to be a good part of your end game. So yeah, expect this to be very difficult, but if you do it, you get these really good unique rewards, which everyone's going to be going for. There's also another trial here called the Trial of Chaos, which is again something from the campaign that was used to get your ascendancies, and it's coming back at endgame. And it's basically multiple rooms of more and more mobs and bosses. And as you go through, you can take buffs and debuffs that persist and stack. So extra debuffs that stack on top of each other, making the run harder and harder and harder. The rewards here are Val Gems, which again, you'll be familiar with if you've played the first one. And these can give massive risky buffs to your items. The reason these are so good is they corrupt your item, giving it a massive, think of it like a massive roll of a dice. And if you roll well, this gear gets crazy good. If you roll bad, it can make your gear not that good. Some of the things they showed was you can give extra gem slots, extra slots on your gear above what is normally possible, making it crazy OP. However, if it rolls bad, you're in a bad spot, because once you've corrupted your gear, you can make no further changes to it. So yeah, this is something for those that want to really take a risk. That's the Trial of Chaos. So yeah, those are the 2 big endgame trials, and there is so much more than that, what I've just mentioned, that you can deep dive, and I could probably do a 10-15 minute video on one trial. So yeah, they're your big trials. It looks like we need to get items before we can go into these. We can't freely just go in them like everything else. But yeah, they look like they're going to be a ton of fun, and they're tied to your ascendancy, which is really fun as well, because everybody wants to unlock all their ascendancy points and, you know, progress their characters. So yeah, they're the trials. But there's one more thing that we haven't talked about. Okay, so now the Pinnacle Boss, the big final boss of the whole game. So on the Atlas, there is a Pinnacle Boss, this big tower with the final boss. To unlock it, you have to beat the 3 Uber bosses around the map that are guarding it. And they're the faction leaders. So go around the map and you look for these faction leaders. And they're going to be surrounded by like their mini bosses around them. Defeat the mini bosses, then you can fight the Uber boss, defeat the 3 Uber bosses, and then you can go and fight the Pinnacle Boss. However, there's a catch. if you lose to one of these mini bosses, these uber bosses, if one of them beat you, they move. They leave the zone and they move. So you have to go and find them again. So this is not an easy thing. This is not just something you'll go and knock out fast, especially if you're powering up your map, you're powering up your stones and making this harder. This is going to be a hard task. But yeah, do all that and you can access the Pinnacle Boss. They're being very cagey about this. They're not showing anything. They're not telling you anything about this really. It's very secretive. But yeah, the big boss looks exciting. But that's like the 7 endgame systems. Of course, this has its own skill tree as well, like everything else. But yeah, that's the big 7 endgame systems. The 4 overworld things, the 2 trials, and the Pinnacle Boss. That's pretty much everything we know about the game so far. I'd love to go in huge detail and make this, but it'd be like a 1-hour video. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to be excited about. And when we finally get the game, when we finally get early access, I'm going to be making loads of content, guides, videos about everything Path of Exile 2. So if you want to see more, do subscribe to the channel. I'm really excited for this game. As a big lover of ARPGs, this is like a dream come true. This is like the perfect game releasing in just a couple of weeks. So if you want to see more, subscribe for more. But that's it from me. I hope this has helped keep it a little bit simple, but tell you about the systems if you didn't watch the big, over an hour long presentation. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.